Welcome to the What Good Looks Like podcast, where we shine the spotlight on organizations and leaders who are truly living out what it means to champion the message and the work of purpose in the marketplace today. I'm your host, Davin Salvagno.
What's next for you? What's most important to you? Have you identified your values? Have you written down what's and who's most important to you? And how closely can you bring congruency between your checkbook, calendar, and where you invest your time? Because we all know all that matters in life is your relationships. It's all that matters.
Welcome back to the What Good Looks Like podcast. I am here again with Scott Jeffrey Miller, one of my favorite people on the planet. Over the course of the last two podcasts that we've done over the last 3 years, Scott is now, this is his fourth appearance. And this man has just an incredible amount of wisdom that I can't help but share with you. Scott is the former Executive Vice President, Chief Marketing Officer of FranklinCovey. He is a multi-best-selling author with 6+ books out and now in the works, including most notably the Master Mentor series, which we are going to talk about today. This is a 10-book series. It's exciting. Before we dive too far in, I want to introduce you to our guest. Scott, so great to have you back, my friend.
Davin, I'm honored. Which room did you buy your shirt in? Because clearly we're dressed like twins today.
You know, it's funny. I know that you've talked to Amy and we have a great relationship with each other, but she has shared, it's amazing how many cross-section striped shirts I now have in my closet since you and I have been friends over the last 3 years. You know, they say that you become the product of the people you associate with and the book that you read. And it's true. I mean, we're living proof.
I aspire to your influence. Don't aspire to mine. You'll be going downhill, my friend. Nice to see you again.
So good. So good. Well, you have been on quite a journey since we talked last year. I joked that this is your fourth time in 3 years on one of my podcasts, but it's been a full year.
No one else will have me. No one else will have me. I gotta keep coming
not
back.
True. No, you know, it's because you're too busy interviewing everybody else on the planet. You've interviewed literally every author, notable person, thought leader, CEO on your On Leadership podcast series, which is phenomenal. I shared earlier that the only thing deeper than Scott's eyes are the books behind him on his wall. Those are real books. That's not a poster.
Hold that thought, because we carefully curate our guests. This week is Jay Shetty and Simon Sinek and Tony Robbins. It's going to be remarkable.
Not bad.
And I'm going to hold a space for you, because when your next book comes out, The Thief of Purpose, we're going to have a great interview around all of the research and experience that you've curated over your career to understand how does everybody really understand not just discover your purpose, but the things getting in the way of your purpose. So I mean this very seriously. I'm excited to interview you when it's time for your coming book, The Thief of Purpose. Everybody book note that. It's going to be awesome.
Wow.
I'll tell Tony Robbins he can't come back twice. I'm holding a spot for Davin.
Well, I'm very
Tony.
very honored. And do me a favor, if that happens and when that book comes out and it ends up on your wall, take Liz Wiseman's out from behind, put mine behind and put hers in front. Right?
Yeah,
I know
Jay
that's
Shetty, Seth Godin, they don't need me. They don't need me.
Right. Phenomenal. Well, you've been trying to get Jay on your podcast for a very
long
time.
I've been chasing Jay. Finally, he realized my stature. Great. Jay Shetty,
and now if we
most popular person in the world.
Now, if we could just get Delta to recognize your stature so that, you know.
Delta Airlines, how many million more miles do I need to get an upgrade?
Oh, it's so good. So good. So good. Awesome. Well, as you guys could tell listening in today, Scott and I have a lot of fun. This is going to be a very insightful, and that's a very key word, insightful, because that's a common theme in mentorship and in his series, but it's going to be a fun podcast because I will share Scott is truly one of the most authentic, genuine human beings on the face of the planet. And I don't
maybe perhaps the most single, maybe single.
Wow. And when he says the most single, he's not single. He's got an amazing wife and family, 3 boys. He's got lots of purposes. But one thing that I joke that Scott could probably be more of is humble. No, I'm just kidding.
It's true. I'm self-aware. I'm self-aware. I could be more humble.
He's self-aware. He's self-aware. Okay.
But with all these friends, who needs some humility?
Oh my gosh. So good. All right. So let's get serious for a minute, because mentorship is a serious topic. And I think that, the word mentor is something that people use very liberally, and it dilutes it almost a little bit. But you have had some tremendous mentors in your life that, as I've read your books and your works, clearly have shaped you into the amazing person that you are. And, clearly there's something to this, because you have the Master Mentor series, which of course is based off of your podcast and all of the books that are behind you. And that's a 10-book series. But then you've got a new work that's coming out that we're not here to talk about that today. We'll get to that, but it's a brand new announcement. So I don't want to steer your thunder.
My fifth appearance, we'll talk about that one.
Okay, we'll talk about that one. Your fifth appearance, we'll talk about that one. But it really is on what great mentorship looks like. And so this is the What Good Looks Like podcast. And so we're going to talk about what good mentorship looks like on this podcast. For great mentorship, you'll have to buy Scott's next book. So let's talk about the Master Mentor series. Talk to me about what inspired you to write this. Talk to me about what mentorship means to you. Let's have that conversation.
Well, Davin, you set me up so well, right? I don't know anybody that's had success in their career that isn't the result of having mentors, formal mentors or informal mentors. My entire career journey, kind of 2 steps forward, 1 step back, has always been saved by someone typically taking me aside and giving me some courageous feedback or sharing with me about my blind spots. And so I am the product of people who always believed in me more than perhaps I even believed in myself in that moment. And so, secondly, I think that we tend to define mentorship too narrowly. Now, I don't want to water it down or use it too liberally, like maybe you inferred some do, which I think is accurate. But I don't think the person who's mentoring you has to be in the C-suite on the 6th floor that you were paired with in your organization. By the way, that's a great mentorship opportunity. If it comes your way, take it for sure. But I also believe that there are other people who play roles in our lives that are absolutely my and your mentors that we never meet. But I'll tell you, the most influential mentors in my life, Davin, don't know I'm alive. They have no idea Scott Miller even exists. Like there's anybody left in the world that doesn't know Scott Miller exists, but maybe a few. Here's a great example. When I was in my teens, I'm 54 now, from Orlando originally. When I was in my teens, there was a very popular radio program every night from 6 to 9 in Central Florida. I got an AM station and I listened to it, a man named Bruce Williams. He was kind of the original talk radio guy. In fact, his program was called TalkNet. Then it became the Bruce Williams Show. And for close to 10 years, when all my friends were listening to, Devo and NXS and Rolling Stones, I was listening to Bruce Williams talk about when to have an attorney, when do you need a will, how to buy a home, about your credit score, how to invest in inheritance. So for 3 hours a night, I was being mentored by a man named Bruce Williams while I'm in bed listening, kind of like the Alex P. Keaton of my years. Long story short, Bruce Williams passed never knowing I existed, but he was probably the most influential mentor in my life. And so I want to expand people's concept of what mentors can mean to you. It's why I wrote these books, Master Mentors, Volume 1 and Volume 2. Like you, I'm privileged to host a podcast where, like you, I interview some great guests. And after about the first 100 episodes, I realized, oh my gosh, there's so much wisdom coming in from Liz Wiseman and Susan Cain and Kim Scott and General McChrystal and Seth Godin and Dan Pink and on and on and on, and soon to be Davin in his book, The Thief of Purpose. Seriously. And most of the nuggets were shared off air. Like when we would end the episode, we'd stick around visually or virtually for 10 minutes and talk and say, oh my gosh, why didn't you share that during the episode? That's golden. And so with their permission, I picked 30 people to share 30 insights. Easy, breezy, fast. It's in the book. Each chapter is about, 1,500 words. I don't write good to great or built to last kind of books. Snoozer. Impactful, but not my kind of books. I'm kidding. Jim Collins is an icon and a friend of mine. My point is I write chicken soup for the soul kinds of books. You can read one chapter, then 9 minutes before bed, reflect on it, go to sleep, come back and read it somewhere else the next day. I don't advise anybody to write a book about 30 celebrities because that's like herding feral cats, right? With permissions and legal kind of stuff, but they've been very generous. And I now have interviewed about 100 more people. I have 30 more in Master Mentors Volume 2. I'd even love to take some time today to talk about a couple of them. The big idea there is we all have formal mentors we meet with every other Thursday from 3 to 4, and they hold us accountable. Great, do that multiple times in your life, regardless of where you are in your career. And we all have people that we read their blogs and we listen to their podcast and go to conferences because they're speaking, and they are also mentors to us.
Mm. That itself is insightful. I joked when we were laughing earlier about that you become the combination of the people that you surround yourself with and the books that you read. And I was just out in San Diego last week with our mutual good friend, Gary Ridge, who, of course, is an author and the former CEO of WD-40 Company for the last 25 years. And he's written a couple of books, and he talked to me. He said, Davin, some of the people who have shaped me into who I am today, I've never met. I've read their books. Yeah. Their books have mentored me through my years. And I feel like that's almost a lost art. I feel like I love the fact that you have this literally shrine to knowledge behind you, because I feel like, there's a lot of people that they will get in the habit of buying books, but they don't read the books from a standpoint of the author speaking into their life to take something from it and then actually apply it so that person can become who they were created to be. Because a lot of people are probably saying, well, Davin, aren't you the purpose guy? Isn't this podcast supposed to be about purpose? Well, here's the deal. If you're listening to this, there's a person that you were supposed to become. There's a purpose that you're supposed to be living. And it's likely that you're going to get most of those insights from a book that you're going to read, someone that you hear speak, someone who maybe is an informal mentor like Scott is saying. So Scott, that alone itself was incredibly insightful, and why this series is so powerful.
Well, in fact, Gary learned that concept from me, I'm sure, about I'm kidding. He's a fine person. I actually know them because of you, because you are a super connector. It's probably your genius, right? Is your abundance and interest in connecting people. Let's talk about some of the mentors. Do you mind?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's dive into some of the mentors.
So in each book, I pick 30 people from all different walks of life, nationalities, celebrity status. Some of them are household names, some you've never heard of, but they did something remarkable or researched something fascinating or survived something traumatic, which is the story of the first mentor in volume 2, a man named Zafar Masood. For those that are listening and also watching today, for every book that I create, I have a card deck. I don't use PowerPoint ever. Stop using PowerPoint. What I do is I create a card deck that has the images of all the mentors, and the back of them is the insight and a QR code that takes you to the podcast, because this is a PowerPoint that everyone can take home. But Zafar Masood is master mentor number 31. So volume 1 was 1 through 30, and volume 2 is 31 through 60, and then on to ultimately 300 mentors over 10 years in 3 volumes. I like to promise big things. Can you tell? I promised my wife a Bentley. She's waiting for it too. Master mentor number 31 is a man named Zafar Masood. He is the CEO of the Bank of Punjab, a very popular banking institution in Karachi, Lahore, Pakistan. And he flies frequently to all these banks around Pakistan. And one particular day, I believe it was back in May of 2020, and right in the middle of the pandemic, when jets were just getting back into the air, about 3 months in, he was flying from, I believe it was Lahore to Karachi, about an hour-and-a-half flight, and very common for him. He's an early riser, and he always sits in seat 1B. Unlike me, that sits in 36B, Zafar sits in 1B, the aisle seat in the forward cabin. This particular morning, he'd been assigned to 1A, the window seat. Gets to the airport early and manages to finagle his way with the attendant into 1B. Gets on the plane takes off, about an hour and a half into about an hour and 40-minute flight. They announced that they're landing, and he, gets ready for landing, and the plane comes in for a landing, has a pretty rough landing, and takes off again, which maybe happens to you once in your life if you fly a lot, like Davin and I do. And so the roughness of the landing actually opened the cockpit door. It flew open.
Oh no! As
the plane is circling again, and this is a very rare occurrence. The plane seems to be fine, but Zafar can see the horror on the look of the pilots in the plane and also the attendants. In fact, they were Muslim, obviously from Pakistan, and he could hear the attendants citing the Quran. And so what he didn't realize is that the pilots, it was later uncovered in the investigation, had failed to lower the landing gear. And when the plane came in, it hit it on its belly and its engine and damaged the engine. So as the plane was coming back in for a second landing, it crashed into some buildings up in midair. And everyone died except for 2 people. 98 people died, the pilots, the crew, all the passengers, except for 2 people, Zafar, Masood, and 1 other person. Zafar was ejected from the plane, hundreds of feet in the air, strapped into his seat, upright, alive, and on fire, and his seat lands on the top of a building and slides down, drops 30 more feet, and he lands on the hood of a car, upright, unconscious, strapped in, on fire. It's like 8 o'clock in the morning. This car he lands on, it's occupied by 2 young men getting ready to turn it on to go to work that morning. The windows blow out of the car. The windshield blows out. They come to and realize, oh my gosh, there's a man in an airline seat, unconscious, on fire, upright, strapped in on our hood. They get out. They rescue him while all this carnage is happening and air fuel and fires. And you can imagine, Zafar lives. And he lives to really share with all of us. So what's next? Like, what do you do after you've survived an airline crash? Well, one thing you have is what's called survivor's guilt. And he writes about it and talks about it in my podcast episode. And I just felt compelled to feature him number 1, because I don't want anybody to have to survive an airline crash to determine today what's next, what's important to you. The next day, my oldest son, Thatcher, he's 12, named after my hero, Margaret Thatcher, comes home from school, 6th grade, this is a year ago, and he has a writing assignment where the teacher wants him to write down all his traditions. So I'm leaning over Thatcher. You and I have fairly similar parenting styles. We're friends and we see each other a lot. My son writes down, we go to mass on Sundays. We're Catholic in our family. We go to church on Sundays. We go to the country club for brunch, and sometimes we watch movies. And I was horrified. I thought, those aren't traditions. Those are like activities. Those are things we do in life. And I started thinking, oh my gosh, I've got to start to create some traditions for these 3 boys of ours, like things that they will honor and remember and hold tender in their hearts. They're not going to remember going to brunch on Sundays. Maybe they will. I hope they do. I want them to work hard enough to join a country club, so hopefully they do. But you get the point. The next day, my wife and I went out and we looked seriously to buy a cabin. Not like a big cabin, but like Daniel Crockett's cabin, or Daniel Boone's. What's his name? Crockett. What's Crockett's first name? I forgot. Davy Crockett,
Davy
right?
Crockett.
Or Daniel Boone,
Davy
right?
Crockett.
Like a rustic one. Catch fireflies and a zip line and play football in the backyard and have barbecues. And the point of all that is not to at all bring levity to Zafar's story, but to ask yourself, so that you don't have to have a life or death experience to get your values and your priorities in order. What's next for you? What's most important to you? Have you identified your values? Have you written down what's and who's most important to you? And how closely can you bring congruency between your checkbook and your calendar and where you invest your time? Because we all know we like to drive nice cars and be in nice homes and wear nice clothes, and that all that matters in life is your relationships. It's all that matters. Your reputation, maybe your soul if you're religious, but otherwise it's your relationships in life. And that's the big learning, if you will, from the first chapter. And all the rest of them are kind of similarly as profound, in my opinion.
So I can't even imagine what it must have been like having to have that conversation with Zafar. But for those of you listening, we did a lot of joking at the beginning of this podcast, but now you understand when I say that why Scott is who he is and how he shares. These stories, every single one of them, are so incredibly insightful to helping you learn something that is going to help you uncover, fulfill, unleash the purpose that you or your organization are created for. And Scott, I can't thank you enough for sharing that story. I know you want to get into Bobby. So let's get into Bobby.
Thank you. Thanks. it's a balance between women and men in different industries and races and ages. But the next one I want to take time for two today is a man named Bobby Herrera. I'm holding up his picture because this is a life-changing story. Bobby Herrera is a very successful entrepreneur. He wrote a book that is a must-read. Don't buy Master Mentors, buy Bobby's book. It's called The Gift of Struggle. And then soon pre-order a great book called The Thief of Purpose, but stand by. It's on Amazon soon. Not yet, but soon. The Thief of Purpose.
Oh my.
Bobby Herrera is Latino. His family was born in Mexico, one of 13 children. His father met a New Mexican farmer who said, hey, come over the border. I'll sponsor you. We'll have your family work on the farm. Well, he showed up with like 14 kids, 13 kids, actually. Actually, Bobby was the first of the Herrera family to be born in the States in New Mexico. Fast forward, Bobby and his brother used to play high school basketball on the New Mexico high school basketball team. And every night when there was an away game, which is, basketball is, every other night, they would take the school bus, and after their basketball game, whether they won or lost, the team stopped at a local restaurant and everyone got off and went in and had dinner. Kind of cool. Except for the Herrera brothers. They stayed on the bus. They didn't join the team. Because with 13 kids and a Latino struggling family, there was no money to go in and have dinner with the team. My sense is it wasn't Ruth's Chris. It was more like probably the Sizzler, right? Or Quincy's. Remember Quincy's and the Sizzler? Oh my gosh. The sirloin tips and the mushroom sauce for like $6.
The buildings still exist. You drive by them and it's like it's like traveling into the past.
I know. Everybody went in to have dinner except for the Herrera brothers. And everybody knew the Herrera brothers stayed in the bus and they ate the brown bag dinner that their mom had packed them. Imagine how humiliating that was for the Herrera brothers. But they knew no different because there wasn't money both for basketball fees and for dinner. So every night, the Herrera brothers stayed on the bus. Except for one night when one of the team members' fathers, a very successful businessman named Mr. Teague, reboarded the bus and walked back to the Herrera brothers. I can't tell the story without getting emotional. I've told the story 100 times. Walked back to the Herrera brothers and said, boys, I'd like you to be my guest at dinner tonight. No one needs to know. Handed them some money and said, I want you to be my guest for dinner. Our secret, in exchange, I want you to do something great in your life to pay it forward to somebody else. That was a dinner at the freaking Sizzler. But Bobby said it was the first time in his life where he ever felt seen by someone else. I'm emotional about it because I was raised in a fairly affluent family. That never happened to me, but I remember the first time someone made me feel seen. I remember it. I remember exactly where I was standing. I remember her nationality. She was Israeli at a bakery in Winter Park, Florida, where I worked as a busboy and a waiter. Bobby said it was the first time in his life where he'd ever felt seen by someone else. He couldn't see tomorrow. He couldn't see college. He couldn't see anything. He had no purpose in his life. He went on to serve honorably 4 years in the Army. He went on to become a fantastically successful CEO of a $500 million company. He wrote this book called The Gift of Struggle. And the point of all of this is, in our lives, everyone at one point or another reboarded the bus for us. Everyone at some point in our life made us feel seen. And I want the gift of this chapter to ask you, who will you reboard the bus for? Who will you make feel seen? Because all of us have some level of power, whether it's positional power or financial power or utility power or coercive power or principle-centered power. All of us are in a position to reboard the bus for someone metaphorically and make them feel seen. And Davin, you know this because you're an expert in this. It might be something that requires no political capital or no money or no favors, just to walk up to somebody and say, you know what? Something I like about you is how you put your family first. Well, you know what? I love your focus and discipline, or I love your ingenuity and creativity. Be specific. And I'm sorry, I kind of lost my consonants there. It's a very meaningful story for me, probably because although I can't relate to the circumstance that Bobby was in, not being able to afford dinner, because in the Miller house you could, but I remember when someone boarded the bus for me, it was a customer, and she made me feel seen. Different story, different book. But there are, 28 stories just like this that will stop you in your tracks, hopefully, and inspire you in short, easy, breezy reads. They're all not so heavy. Some of them are heavier, some of them are lighter. The book is very episodic. I talk about, marketing plans and communication plans and business models and brain health. I talk about being on the right side of history, being on the wrong side of history. And so I hope that gives your listeners and viewers a little bit of a glimpse of what it's like to be a mentor, what it's like to read master mentors. My point in writing these books is to shine the light on as many other people as possible. The first half of my career, I very much had the light shining on me, right? Everyone that knows me knows that. And I'm trying to make the last half of my life and career taking the megawatts light that is Scott Miller and this privilege that I have on this leadership podcast now and shining it every year on 30 other people. Some of them are famous. Some of them you have never heard of before, like Zafar Masood, potentially, in hopes that the readers, whether you're listening to it on audio, whether you're reading it digitally or reading it in print or watching it on video. All my books now are being transferred into a video book called from Lit Video Books for all those that may like to watch a book versus read a book. But I appreciate you letting me shine the spotlight on these people today.
It was so very special that you share that story. And, we joked in the beginning earlier about this is your fourth time on the show, and the third last year on the you were actually the very first episode of the What Good Looks Like podcast last year, episode 1, and the title of that was Be the Spotlight. I don't know if you remember that. That was literally the title of it. And the reason that I chose that title, I don't know if you remember this, Scott, is because that is your gift, your purpose. We talk, for those of you who haven't read the book Halftime by Bob Buford, fantastic book. He talks about you spend the whole first half of your life conditioned to pursue success. And no matter what level of success you attain or don't attain, the second half of your life, you are searching for significance. And a lot of people between the ages of 35 and 55, he would say, who've achieved whatever level or not level of success, they're always looking for that missing piece. And many of them misconstrue it as a midlife crisis because they know that there's a purpose that they were created for, but they haven't stepped into it. And then when they do step into it, they realize the significance that their life is supposed to have. And yes, you
should write a book about this.
There might be one coming out about that. You may have said its name like 3 times on this podcast. I haven't asked you to do that, and that's been very, very kind. But Scott, that's your gift. Your gift has been being the spotlight for others. And I remember when you came to the Purpose Summit that we did in Mount Clemens, Michigan, now almost 3 years ago. Wow. And it was the first time that you and I met for the first time in person. We'd met, of course, virtually since then. And I can't remember what I said to you, but you shared this, I think, in one of those after conversations in one of our previous podcasts, where I did exactly what you just said, right? You see someone, you see what their gift is, you see how they impact you, and you call that out. And I said, Scott, you have this immense gift to be able to use this platform that you've been given to shine the spotlight on other people's stories that need to be heard, because there's inspiration in stories. And you shared 2 today that if there is a human cell in your body, I guarantee you they impacted you and they challenged you to ask and take stock of your life and what you're doing and to find gratitude in what you have and to maybe convict you to pursue the things that you've been waiting for. I mean, there's power in stories. And so, Scott, when I share that this Master Mentor series is a gift, I'm not saying that lightly. It truly is, because you have poured countless hours, blood, sweat, tears, late night sleeps. We just talked about both of our aggressive travel schedules and into interviewing these people and putting this together, not so that people would just go and buy a book, right? And this isn't one big book promo. There is insights and wisdom and things in here that can mentor you as a listener to live the life that either you've been waiting to live, or that you think that you don't deserve to live, or that you can't live, whatever, to take away your excuses and to equip you to fulfill that purpose. And I know it's not come at any small sacrifice. It's tireless. But one thing that I've appreciated about you, Scott, and there's a lot that I appreciate about you, but one major thing, and we shared this earlier, is that putting family first. You've interviewed all these people. you have obviously achieved an incredible amount of success, 6 books in I think 3 or 4 years. It's been insane what you've done, but you have been home every weekend for your bride and for your 3 boys every weekend. You've never missed mass. You've never missed time with them.
No,
we just talked about your travel schedule for this week, and you're going to be back for a series of basketball games this weekend. Your priorities are in the right place. So could you share a little bit about, and I wasn't prepared to ask you this question, but I think it's an important question. I think there's a lot of people that as they start to dive into mentorship and they start to realize who they can become and what they can achieve, they quickly can also lose sight of what matters most and fail to prioritize what matters most. How have you, as a master mentor, mastered that?
Well, I'm not sure I've mastered that by any stretch. I think it's a constant tension. That's not necessarily a bad thing. You know, for those who may know me or know of me, I was single until I was 41. I got married at 41. And my wife is much younger than I am, a little more than a decade. And we had 3 boys in 5 years. We meaning she. We had 3 boys in 5 years. Don't do that. That was torture for both of us. Now they're 8, 10, and 12. And so my values shifted, my role shifted tremendously, right? So I have done, I think, the appropriate work to get clear on the most important roles in my life, aligned with my values. You know, we hear so much about clarify your values. It's not a new idea to anybody, but you know, about 15 years ago, before I met my now and only wife, I was at a workshop, a FranklinCovey workshop, where Dr. Covey, our founder, was talking about your personal mission statement. And that didn't resonate with me. I got 35-year-old single guy. I don't know. More cars, more trips to Italy, more tennis. I have no idea what my mission is. I'm single. I have no idea. I don't think most people know their mission or purpose. I think we all wish we would, and maybe we're jealous of those who do. But then our other co-founder, Hiram Smith, spoke. He invented the Franklin Planner. Many of you had decades ago, hundreds of millions of those sold.
Absolutely.
And Hiram got up. He's passed now. They've both passed. And Hiram gave this great conversation around clarifying your values. Again, not the first time I'd heard it, but like all of us, it was the right day and the right time and the right role and the right paranoia and the right open heart and the right speaker in the right room. And I went home, and for the course of a couple of days, I got very clear on my values. For the first time in my life, at the age of, 38, I wrote down my values, and they are to this day PHILPAL, PHILPAL. Purpose, health, integrity, loyalty, positivity, abundance, and learning. PHILPAL. And I live my life in fierce congruency with them. Number 1 is purpose. I happen to be raised in a religious family. My family is religious. My wife is not Catholic. I am, and we're raising our boys in that faith. So for us, even though Mass is Sunday morning at 10:30, it starts on Saturday evening, ironing our clothes, writing our checks out. And our boys don't do sleepovers on Saturday nights, ever, because our number 1 role is to recognize what our purpose is in life. And mine is as a father, and we've made some clear values around how we spend our Sundays. We snow ski, and we do lots of things after we do what's most important to us. Health, integrity, loyalty, positivity, abundance, and learning. So my long answer to your short, profound question is, I think how you bring balance in your life, how you bring focus and discipline, what matters most to you is first you have to identify it. What are your roles in life? And they change over your time. What are your values in life? And they change likely as your roles change. And then to make sure that every decision, to the extent you can, is living in accordance with them. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to fall down. Maybe yours aren't 7 values like mine, but I wrote them down because I think, like you opened this podcast with, is sometimes we're a little bit liberal with the term mentorship. I think we're super liberal with the idea of values. Go to a dinner party and someone says, so what are your values? Oh, I value patriotism. I value freedom. I value independent will. Sounds good. Next week, what are your values? Well, I value hard work and discipline and relying. I mean, I think people just throw stuff out. And the smartest thing I've ever done was marry Stephanie. The second smartest thing I've ever done is to identify my values, not in one night, not flippantly. And I'll tell you, I don't give a flying crap what Davin thinks about my values. I did not create them for him or you or anybody else. I created them for me. I did not write them down to impress you, and nor should you write down them to impress me, but you should write them down and you should prioritize them. And then you should get very clear how they align with your roles, and then memorize them. If you're lucky like me, you can find some kooky acronym, PhilPal. What the hell is that? But I tell you, I think my life is better as a result of writing them down, memorizing them. And I'll tell you, if some people that know me well, they would have a hard time accusing me of not living my life in alignment with purpose, health, integrity, loyalty, positivity, abundance, and learning. Because those things are who I am and how I spend my money and my time. It's a long diatribe to your answer, but it's probably the smartest thing, one of the smartest things next to my spouse that I've ever done.
That was so good. And I will tell you, so true. We've known each other for almost almost 4 years now. And without you even saying those words, you live them so well that if someone were to ask me, write down a list of single words that describes who Scott Miller is and how he lives his life.
Thanks.
Several of those 7 words that you just shared are words that I would have chosen. I
appreciate that.
Without you even telling me that, because you live them out that well. And so I think that's a great call to action for those listening, to choose the words not to impress anyone else, but to choose them because they're meaningful to them, and that they are, what was the word that you used? It wasn't fervent. There was a strong word that you used about how
I use a lot of hyperbole.
It was a strong word, but
fiercely, I don't know.
Fiercely live them out, but choose the words that mean something that is non-negotiable to you, that you fiercely live out. And you've done that well. And honestly, I think that's the foundational aspect. I know that this is all about mentorship and we talk about purpose, but the reality is that, purpose is who you are, who you were created to be, what you bring to the world and to others. Mentorship is maybe how you fill that, how you become that through the books that you read, the people that you listen to, like podcasts like this with Scott Miller, and books like his, like Master Mentors, and several others that are on the wall behind him, and the stories that he shared today of Bobby Herrera and Zafar Masood. And these things help shape us. But what's most important along the way, more probably important than who we become and how we became that, is how we live our lives. And that's what our values dictate. It doesn't matter if you achieve great things if people thought that you were a horrible person. And so values are so very critical. And I feel that was a great way to bring this home. And as we wrap up, Scott, as we always do, if you had one last final thing to share with those listening today, that would be earth-shattering, life-changing, what would that be?
Come on, that's not a fair setup. I can't answer that, but I'll say this. Like you, I've had this remarkable career where I've had access to some of the greatest minds in the world, and continue to in these podcasts that I host, and the privilege to write about them. Stephen Covey had a profound impact on my life. He passed about 10 years ago. Of course, the author of The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Stephen inculcated in me that oftentimes in life, our reputations are our most valuable assets. And your reputation is merely the collection of all the decisions you make in life, what you say you will do and what you will do. And so I would remind people to be hyper aware of the reputation that you want, maybe not the one you have. And you have to behave yourself into a great reputation. I once gave a speech, and I asked one of the gentlemen, it was in Ohio of all places, and I asked him who had learned something. And this gentleman stood up, African-American gentleman, and he said, I'm going to today start to behave myself into a reputation of being trusted by others. Because Dr. Covey said, you can't talk yourself out of a problem you behave yourself into. You can only behave your way out. So I'm fiercely, fervently trying to behave my way into a reputation of being trusted by others, to quote that very wise man in the audience 2 years ago in Ohio.
So good. So good.
Thanks, Davin. Thanks for the platform. Thanks for the spotlight.
Of course, I just try to shine back on you what you've shined on so many others.
It's impossible. My mega wattage is just so big. But as I go to the airport in my coach seat, I'll be thinking longingly of you in your coach comfort seat.
Oh my gosh. I'll call Delta and remind them of who you are. No,
Exactly.
Just kidding. I appreciate you, my friend. You honestly, you truly have made a immeasurable, indelible mark on my life through your work. I'm grateful for it. I'm grateful for you, for our friendship, but most of all, for who you genuinely are. Truly, truly a treasure to spend time with you.
Hey, the first of 9 appearances on What Good Looks Like podcast. 4 down, 5 to go.
Right. See this, but for those of you who are still listening, who haven't gotten off this yet, right? That's actually a key. You've heard book a meeting from a meeting. Scott does that really, really well. The reason he's been on 4 times is because he always invites himself on one more time when he gets off. There's a mentorship insight for you right there. So good. For those of you listening today, here with Scott Jeffrey Miller, former executive vice president and chief marketing officer of FranklinCovey, author of the Master Mentors series. You want to make sure you get your hands on these books. Powerful, powerful stories like the ones that he shared today of Bobby Herrera and of Zafar Masood. Incredible. You could follow him on LinkedIn. He probably posts on LinkedIn more than I do. Probably the only person on the planet that does that.
And Twitter and Instagram and TikTok and YouTube and Facebook. I'm on them all.
All the platforms. So all things social. You can find his books in airports and stores, on Amazon. It's a fantastic plane read. I will tell you that. This work will help you fulfill the purpose that you were created for by taking these insights and applying them to your life. So thank you for listening today. Scott, thank you for your time once again. And we'll see you and our listeners probably on another episode of the What Good Looks Like podcast.